DEBx, amplifying voices, accelerating change. Please help me welcome to the DEBx stage, Jheri.
We all have a story, that narrative about who we are and how we became that way. Your story may be one of adventure and excitement, or perhaps it's one of trauma and tragedy, or maybe it's a combination of both. Whatever it is, we all have a story to tell. But I want you to think for just a moment about what is a story, really? Well, my story, for example, it was uninspiring, full of unfortunate events that eventually turned me into another statistic. My parents were divorced when I was young, and that really shattered my world. I was incapable of feeling love for a long time after that. And we moved around a bit, and so I really struggled. I struggled fitting in. I struggled in school. I really struggled being understood. And so, at age 15, I left home. I became pregnant as a teenager, and I had to drop out of high school. It was becoming very clear that I would not amount to anything. And even after I eventually found my way to a six-figure income as a single mother, I didn't see that as a success because all I could see were all of my other failures. And once I got a divorce from my husband and we lost everything, I lost my career. I had no money. I had no education. I had 6 kids to take care of on my own with no child support. And at that time in my life, I had very few friends. My thoughts tortured me, and I listened to those thoughts every single day. Now, sometimes the voices would come from the outside, but usually they came from within. Here's what I heard. You have ruined your life. You have nothing. No one's going to hire you. No one's going to marry you with your 6 kids because you don't matter to anyone. Repeat, repeat, repeat. It felt so true. And I thought those thoughts over and over again until they became a belief. Now, some days I would try to make myself feel better. I would try glossing over my negative thoughts with more positive ones. But because I believed my story so deeply, I always ended up right back where I was, paralyzed with my story about who I had become. I could not permanently let it go. And it was handicapping me in a way that was affecting my future and potential self. But I knew that I couldn't stay in this funk forever, and so I was willing to try anything, and I did. I started talking to people, lots of people, successful people, and I started reading books and going to seminars. I even went and got my GED at age 34, and then I started applying for jobs. And along this journey to fix myself, I met a woman. Someone who had been hit with very similar circumstances as mine, only her life looked very different. When she talked about what she did, she told a story of hard work and perseverance, determination and love. You know, at age 17, she worked 2 jobs and paid for her own apartment. She was not defeated by the challenges that being a teen mom brought. In fact, she was inspired by those obstacles. She overcame each one and grew in the process. She was an incredible mother. And despite not having a high school diploma, because of her drive and her tenacity, she was able to work her way up the ladder and attain a 6-figure income. And even after her divorce, when she lost it all, she thought, well, I did it once, I'll just do it again. Her life is magical. Her life is inspiring. And her life is actually mine. You see, that woman that I discovered along the journey to fix myself was me. I discovered her when I was willing to rewrite the story that I had written for my life. I discovered that if I chose to think about my story differently, remember it differently, have different thoughts about it, that I could, in fact, change it. What? All this time, I thought I had no control over what the world was giving me. So I want you to consider for just a moment that everything that you believe about your life is not a fact, that none of it is absolutely true. Everything that we know to be true is just our imagination. Our minds are creating our lives for us. Now, I'm not suggesting that your circumstances aren't happening. They are happening, of course. But what I'm suggesting is the way that we interpret those circumstances, the way that we experience those circumstances is a choice. It's not the people, places, and things in your life that creates your story. Your story is created from the thoughts that you have about your circumstances. And it is those thoughts that cement the story of who we are. Everything you think, everything you do, the way you respond, the person that you are sitting here today is all because of the story that you have written for your life. So I learned that life wasn't so much about circumstances, but about what we make each circumstance in our lives mean. And so now I had to decide, was I willing to be wrong about my story? Ugh. No matter how painful our stories are, we like to hold them close. We don't like to let them go. But I had to come to grips with the fact that maybe what I thought was happening isn't actually what was happening. And that's when I realized that I had the power to completely change my story. And by the way, once my story changed, so did my past, my painful past. It just disappeared. I learned a lot from Byron Katie, who's a famous author and speaker. And her background had some similarities to mine. And she said of her experiences, she said, I discovered that when I believed my thoughts, I suffered. But that when I didn't believe them, I didn't suffer. Freedom is as simple as that. Suffering is optional. And I thought, what? I mean, I'm going to be honest. I don't think I would have really believed that statement on its own had I not applied it in my life. And so I decided to do the work. I started analyzing everything that I believed about my life. And then I started questioning whether or not it was serving me. And then I started asking myself what I wanted to believe about my life and what it was capable of. And you know, it's interesting. When I chose to believe new things, I was able to accomplish lots of new things. But when I chose to believe old things, painful things, regardless of whether or not I could find evidence that they were true, I always was left feeling pain. But if I tried hard enough, I could find evidence for many other wonderful things that were just as true. And then I thought about whether or not this is something that each of us has the power to do in our own lives. But how do we shift from a contaminated view to a more empowering one? Because I remember trying to gloss over those negative thoughts with positive ones and becoming so frustrated because it never lasted. Well, it was funny because I actually found the solution for shifting our view when I looked up the steps on how to rewrite an actual story for an English class. I found the following instructions. So the first thing is to read the story. So look at the story that you're telling yourself. And then look at all of the characters and decide if you want to make any improvements. Maybe a family member that you can't forgive. Improve them in the way that you want to see them. And then the next thing is you get to get creative with the plot, which really means just find other things that you can believe that are just as true. And then decide, do you want to change the entire story or just parts of it? Yes, I want to change the parts that aren't working for me. So note what you want to change. Remember, make sure it's something that you can believe. Combine the good elements with the improved ones, start writing, and complete the final version. And I thought, exactly! This is all each of us has to do with our own story. And this is exactly what I did with my story. The more I started to question my thoughts, the more I started to believe that my life could be different. My thoughts went from, well, I'm never going to make it. I mean, this is where I've landed. I've kind of ruined everything. Bummer. And then eventually they grew into, well, I mean, I hope one day I make it. I know probably not going to make it. I've probably blown it, but I hope I get close. And then eventually to, well, I don't know, why wouldn't I make it? I mean, I could make it. I think I could make it. And then to, I can do anything at all. And that's, my friends, when I made it. This is what helped me to get married again and have a 7th child and embark on careers that I never thought possible. You know, they hired me to be an in-flight instructor for the airline. I had never even worked in the airline industry. They gave me my own talk show on the largest talk show station in Arizona. I knew nothing about radio. I was able to build a successful real estate business and then go on to coach other women, helping them do the same. I am the woman I am standing on this stage today because I was willing to be wrong about the story that I had written for my life. So, I have a question for you. Are you willing to be wrong about your story? Any part of your story? If you could rewrite your story right now, what would you write? Thank you.